Harlem, New York. The clock struck 2:34 in the afternoon. It was Thursday, June 12th, 1952. That is when Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson's black Cadillac hit a red light on Lenox Avenue, right near 132nd Street. And there stood a little girl, maybe 5 or 6 years old, drowning in a dress that was too small and stained with grime. Her face held the hollow look of true starvation as she stepped up to the glass and tapped with thin, trembling fingers. Johnson sat in the back like a king on his throne. His wheelman, William Quick Davis, kept his eyes forward. They were fresh from a sit-down with the policy operators, who paid their respects and their tribute to Johnson's empire. Just another Thursday in June, 1952, sticky and hot. The Harlem streets were packed with folks chasing a dollar, business as usual, until that tiny hand hit the glass. Davis went to wave the kid off like a fly. Panhandlers were a dime a dozen, and the boss's time was worth more than gold, too valuable to stop for handouts. But then Johnson caught a glimpse of the kid's face through the tint, and he ordered Davis to lower the window. "Are you Bumpy?" the kid whispered, voice so faint Johnson had to lean in, just to catch the words. "Yeah, sweetheart, I am Bumpy," Johnson answered, his eyes locking onto hers. He saw the hunger carving out her cheeks, the kind of desperation in her eyes that no 5-year-old should ever know. A small smile broke across her face, like knowing who he was took a weight off her shoulders. "My mama says you are the good guy in this town. She says you are the one who helps folks when they are down." Johnson felt a knot pull tight in his chest. The man was 47 years old in June, 1952, the biggest boss in Harlem, the man holding the leash on millions in the numbers racket, a survivor of turf wars, police raids, and hard time in the state pen. People called him plenty of names: gangster, the numbers king, the enforcer. But the good guy? That was not a title he heard often, especially not from a kid who did not know any better, just repeating what her mother told her. "Thank you, sweetheart," Johnson said, voice low. "That is a kind thing for your mama to say." The kid's smile vanished, replaced by a look of dead seriousness. It broke your heart to see it on a face that young. "But, Mr. Bumpy, my mommy and me, we are starving. There is no food in the house. And Mommy says we are going to be on the street soon because she is short on rent. She cries every night when she thinks I am asleep. Mr. Bumpy, please, can you help us?" Now, William Davis saw it all go down. He told the Harlem Gazette on June 14th, 1952, exactly what happened. Bumpy Johnson, a man whose name meant iron-willed toughness and street smarts, a man who stayed ice cold when others cracked, looked at that pleading little girl, and he started to weep. "I saw a single tear track down Mr. Johnson's cheek," Davis said. First one, then another followed. He was not making a sound, no sobbing, but the tears were flowing freely. And his face. I never saw the boss look like that. He looked completely destroyed, like that little girl's hunger shattered a part of him that bullets and prison bars could never touch. But here is what Davis did not know, and what that little girl could never understand. Right then, on June 12th, 1952, Bumpy Johnson was fighting a war at home, a private hell that had been eating him alive for months, his own flesh and blood, his daughter Elise Johnson, 28 years old and fresh from childbirth. But Elise had fallen deep into the heroin trap. She cut her father out years ago, raising his newborn granddaughter in the gutter, living in a way Johnson knew could end in a casket, staring at that starving 5-year-old by his window. Johnson was looking right at the future of his own granddaughter if he did not step in. He saw the fate of children whose mothers could not put bread on the table, whose families had crumbled, kids for whom staying alive was a daily war. "What is your name, sweetheart?" Johnson asked, wiping his face fast. "Keisha," she said. "Keisha Williams. And where do you stay, Keisha?" The girl pointed to a building down the block, a tenement that Johnson knew was a rat trap, one of the worst in Harlem. No heat when the cold wind blew. crawling with vermin. A place where desperate souls landed when they had run out of luck. Johnson reached for his wallet and peeled off a stack of $20 bills. More cash than Keisha Williams had ever seen. He shoved a wad of cash into the kid's small hands, more scratch than she'd ever seen. Give this to your mother, understand? Tell her Bumpy Johnson is stepping in to fix things. Tell her my soldiers will be at your door tomorrow. The fridge is gonna be full, you hear me? No sleeping on the streets, not on my watch. Keisha nodded, gripping that dough like a lifeline. Tears started rolling down her cheeks. Thanks, Mr. Bumpy, she whispered, voice shaking. Mama said you were stand-up people. Johnson watched the kid hustle back to her tenement. Then he turned to Davis. The look on the boss's face was something new, something heavy. It was cold resolve mixed with desperation. Quick, get the address on the Williams family right now. Cover their rent for 2 years solid. I want groceries dropped off every single week. Put the mother on the payroll. Find her a spot in one of our clean fronts, somewhere she makes an honest buck. And keep eyes on that kid. Constant check-ins. Ensure she's eating and in school. Get it done today, not tomorrow, right now. You got it, boss? Davis replied, easing the ride off the curb and pointing the nose back toward headquarters, ready to put the wheels in motion. But as Davis navigated the asphalt, he checked the rear view. The king of Harlem was weeping in silence, tears carving paths down his face, staring blankly at the concrete jungle. Boss, everything good back there? Davis asked, keeping his tone low. Johnson let the silence hang. When he spoke, it was gravel grinding against glass. My bloodline arrived 3 weeks ago, quick. Name's Margaret. Her mother, my Elise, is hooked on the junk. I haven't seen Elise in 2 years. She froze me out. Won't take a dime or a favor, just keeps chasing that dragon into an early grave. And now she's dragged a baby into it. I don't know if the kid's eating, if she's safe, or if she's living in a rat hole no child should see. Seeing that kid, Keisha, the hunger in her eyes, I realized that's Margaret's fate if I don't step up. That's the hell waiting for my granddaughter if her mother keeps using and I don't take control. Davis held the wheel steady, silence filling the cab. Then he spoke. We got the Williams girl covered, boss. And we'll track down your daughter and the baby. We'll make sure both kids are secure. You better be right, quick, Johnson muttered, eyes on the glass. My gut says the clock is ticking down. 7:30 post-meridian, June 12th, 1952. Bumpy Johnson walked into his fortress on Edgecombe Avenue, finding his wife Mamie fixing supper. She clocked the heavy atmosphere the second he walked in. Bumpy's eyes were bloodshot. The swagger was gone, replaced by a weight that bent his shoulders. Bumpy, talk to me, Mamie said, leaving the stove to settle next to her man on the sofa. Years later, Mamie said Bumpy opened up about the kid tapping on his car window, about the tears he couldn't hold back, and the terror gnawing at him regarding his granddaughter, Margaret. My soldiers brought me intel today, Bumpy murmured. Elise dropped a baby girl 3 weeks back. Margaret, no ID on the father, likely just another junkie from her circle. The boys made her 2 days ago, copping heroin from a pusher on 145th, and she had the infant with her. The kid looked bad. May, dirty, skin and bones, like she's starving. It's a sin to let a child exist in that filth. It's a curse on my house, that I'm letting my own flesh and blood suffer because I can't get through to her mother. Mamie absorbed every word, gripping Bumpy's hand tight. Even though Elise wasn't her own blood, a child from Bumpy's past life, Mame knew the boss's heart bled for that girl, and how the dope and the distance were killing him. Bumpy, we gotta bring them in, Mamie stated, voice steel. We drag Elise home, force her clean, and secure Margaret. I know she'll fight, I know she'll scream, but the innocent doesn't pay for the mother's sins. Margaret deserves a real life. Bumpy nodded, clearing the moisture from his eyes. I'm tracking them down, May. Tomorrow, every soldier on the payroll, hits the bricks to find Elise and Margaret. When we locate them, they return to the fold, and Elise has no voice in this matter. My blood will not wither away in hunger. I will not repeat the tragedy of that child, Keisha. Margaret shall not meet the reaper simply because her grandfather moved with lead in his shoes. It was 9:15 in the morning, Friday, June 13th, 1952. Bumpy Johnson held court in his designated booth at Small's Paradise on 7th Avenue, nursing a breakfast he didn't want, eyes scanning the New York Times. Sleep had been a stranger to him the previous night, his mind a war room, plotting the extraction of Elise and Margaret, strategizing their salvation. He flipped to page 7, his gaze patrolling the columns of local misery, when text froze the blood in his veins. A headline screaming silent horror: mother and child found deceased in Harlem tenement. Suspected heroin overdose. The paper trembled in Johnson's iron grip. Authorities had uncovered the remains of a Jane Doe, a female subject roughly 20 to 30 years of age, and beside her, an infant daughter, mere weeks into this cruel world. The grim discovery occurring yesterday evening. 4th floor, West 143rd Street. Early reports pointed to the needle. A fatal overdose, claimed the mother. The child perished from starvation and abandonment, the dwelling holding no sustenance, only emptiness. Law enforcement is currently scrambling to put names to the dead and notify next of kin. Witnesses at Small's claim. Johnson rose with such violent speed that his coffee cup was sent flying, all color draining from the Godfather's face, his breath coming in ragged gasps. His enforcer, Marcus Big Sam Jackson, lunged to his boss's side as Johnson faltered, barely catching his weight against the mahogany table. "Boss, what is the situation?" Jackson demanded, urgency in his tone. Johnson's voice had abandoned him. He simply leveled a trembling finger at the newsprint, and Jackson scanned the text with efficient eyes. "Christ," Jackson muttered. "But boss, the victims are unidentified. We don't know it's Elise. We don't know it's Margaret." "The odds say otherwise," Johnson rasped, his composure cracking. 143rd. That is her last known location. 4th floor walk-up. It aligns with our intel. Mother in her late 20s. That is Elise. Infant. Barely a month old. That is Margaret. It is them, Sam. My bloodline. Extinguished. They are gone because I moved too slow. Johnson shoved past his man, staggering out of the establishment, spilling onto 7th Avenue, where his driver, Quick Davis, stood ready beside the black Cadillac. Johnson seized Davis by the suit jacket, words firing like a Tommy gun. "Quick, mobilize every soldier. Locate Elise immediately. Secure her and secure my granddaughter, Margaret. Tear apart every tenement, every corner, every shooting gallery in Harlem. Cost is irrelevant. Produce them now, before the clock runs out. Almighty, do not let the clock run out." Davis instantly keyed the vehicle's radio, barking orders to the lieutenants, commanding the entire organization to cease all other operations and focus solely on Elise Johnson and the child. Within 30 minutes, 50 soldiers were combing the Harlem streets, raiding the junkie hangouts, pressing dealers for any sighting of the king's daughter, flashing photographs to every soul on the pavement. Bumpy Johnson endured those agonizing hours, marching the concrete outside Small's Paradise, the damned newspaper still clutched in his hand, holding the obituary of the unknown pair, whispering quiet pleas to the Almighty, a sight the streets had never witnessed. "Lord, show mercy," Johnson chanted like a mantra. "Let them breathe. Grant me one final opportunity to intervene. I will pay any price. Just let them be among the living." From 9 in the morning until 12:45 on that June 13th, 1952, Johnson walked through hell. He would call it the darkest 3 hours of his existence. Worse than the isolation of prison, worse than any turf war, more painful than any physical assault. Every 15 minutes, a soldier's voice crackled over the radio. "Sector 145 is clear. 3 shooting galleries on Amsterdam checked. Target not acquired. Street pushers claim 0 sightings. Each report was a hammer blow to Johnson's resolve, the silence only solidifying the conviction that the corpses on 143rd Street were indeed his own flesh and blood. During that window, the Godfather was reduced to rubble. Davis would later recount, "I had never seen the boss in such a state. He refused food, refused to sit, he just kept. He sat there, clutching that crumpled newspaper, eyes wet but voice steady, repeating the same mantra like a prayer for the damned. I failed them. My own blood. I saw the signs, I knew Elise was drowning, and I didn't reach out my hand fast enough. Seeing the king of Harlem, a man who walked through fire without a scratch, crumble like a common ruin because he believed his lineage was severed. It was a brutal sight. At 12:43 in the afternoon, static cut through the silence on Davis's radio. It was Robert Chen on the other end, one of Johnson's most reliable soldiers, scouring the concrete jungle near 147th and 8th Avenue. "Boss, it's Chen. I got eyes on her. Elise is here. She's breathing. Corner of 147th and 8th. But listen, it ain't pretty. She's in the gutter, high out of her mind, begging dealers for a fix. But the girl is still breathing. No sign of the kid, though. Just her." Davis relayed the intel to Johnson immediately. The boss's expression shifted instantly. The grief vanished, replaced by a cold, terrifying focus mixed with a father's panic. "She's alive," Johnson breathed, a single tear cutting through his stone face. "Thank God. Get the car. We move. Now." They tore through the streets, from Small's Paradise to the intersection in under 10 minutes. When the wheels stopped, Johnson laid eyes on his daughter for the first time in 2 years. The sight was enough to bring a Titan to his knees. Elise sat on the cold curb, draped in rags that hadn't seen water or soap in weeks. Her hair was a tangled mess, her face a hollow skull carved by starvation and the poison in her veins. Her arms were a road map of needle scars. She was pleading with 2 men standing over her, pushers. Johnson clocked them instantly. She was begging them for another hit, swearing she was good for the money, speaking in riddles. Johnson stepped out of the Cadillac, moving toward his blood with heavy steps. Chen and Davis flanked him like shadows, hands ready near their coats in case the punks felt brave. But the dealers saw the Godfather approaching. Every soul in Harlem knew the face of Bumpy Johnson. They scattered like rats, knowing better than to cross a man who owned the streets. "Elise," Johnson whispered, his expensive suit hitting the dirty pavement as he knelt. She looked up, her eyes glassy and lost in the fog. She didn't even know the man who raised her. Who's that?" she slurred. "It's me, baby girl," Johnson said, his iron composure cracking. "It's your father. It's Daddy." She stared through him for a long moment. Then, a spark of memory cut through the haze. "Daddy? What? Why are you here?" "I'm here to clean this mess up," Johnson stated firmly. "I'm taking care of you, but I need the truth. And I need it now. Where are you staying? Where is the apartment?" Elise tried to answer, but her throat was like sandpaper, the words dying on her tongue. Johnson signaled for water, helped her drink, and pressed again, his voice demanding yet gentle. "Where is the place, Elise? Where are you sleeping? Tell me. I need to know." Her hand trembled as she lifted it, pointing a finger down the street toward a tenement 2 blocks down. "There, 2nd building, 3rd floor. And the child?" Johnson's voice hardened with urgency. "Elise, where is my granddaughter? Where is Margaret?" Her face went blank, her mind struggling to pull the answer from the abyss of her addiction. Then a moment of lucidity hit her. "Margaret, she's back there. With the others." Johnson didn't hesitate. He broke into a run, a dead sprint, something the boss of Harlem never did. He charged toward the tenement, taking the stairs 2 at a time, tearing his way to the 3rd floor. Chen and Davis were hot on his heels. The door was unlocked. Johnson kicked it open and walked straight into a nightmare. 5 junkies, 3 men, 2 women, all wasted, sprawled out in a one-room rat hole that smelled like death sweat, rotting food, and filth. The place was a landfill of empty bottles, needles, and trash covering every inch. No furniture to speak of, just a stained mattress on the floor and some busted chairs. And in the corner, discarded in a cardboard box with a filthy rag, was the baby. Barely 3 weeks old, Margaret Johnson, the heir to the kingdom. "Oh, God," Johnson whispered, rushing to the box and scooping her up with trembling hands. Margaret was alive, but barely. She was skin and bones. She hadn't been changed in days. The neglect was absolute. The child was a dried-up husk, skin clinging tight to her bones. No tears, no noise. She didn't have the strength to whimper. She was a rag doll in Johnson's grip, fading fast. Chen watched the boss find his own flesh and blood like that. The king of Harlem stood frozen, clutching little Margaret while silent tears carved tracks down his stone face. His eyes swept the rat hole, taking in the junkies who'd been watching her rot, while her mother was out chasing a fix. Johnson's voice was a low rumble. "This is on me. I let this slide. My own blood nearly checked out in a cardboard box, surrounded by fiends, while I was busy building a kingdom. What sort of man allows this? What kind of father?" "Boss, we got here," Chen cut in, voice steady. "She's breathing. We get the best docs, we fix her up, give her a castle. We pulled her out." Johnson nodded, tightening his hold on the tiny bundle. "Yeah, we got her. Thank the Lord for that. But listen good, never again. Not while I draw breath. Margaret lives like a queen from today on. Safe, untouchable. That is my oath to this child." Johnson snapped his head toward Davis. "Move. Grab Elise from the spot. Get her here. Then get Dr. Williams on the line. Tell him to meet us at the penthouse. Now. I got a baby in critical condition from neglect. Then send a runner for Mamie. Tell her the search is over. We're bringing Margaret home." 20 minutes later, the Godfather had his broken family loaded into the Cadillac, tearing asphalt toward Edgecombe Avenue. Elise was nodding off in the front, a ghost of herself. In the back, Johnson cradled Margaret, swaddled in his suit jacket. She was shaking with fever, even in the sweltering June heat. For the next 3 days, June 13th to the 16th, 1952, Bumpy Johnson tried to pull off a miracle his crew called impossible, keeping his junkie daughter locked down to force a detox, while trying to save the life of his dying granddaughter. It was a war on 2 fronts. Dr. Samuel Williams, a physician loyal to the Johnson organization for years, looked Margaret over. On the night of June 13th, the verdict was heavy. "This child is starving and dry as a bone. She hasn't eaten right since day 1. She belongs in a hospital, Bumpy. Right now. Another 48 hours on the street? She would have been in a pine box. As it stands, she needs weeks of round-the-clock watch and serious feeding to bounce back." Johnson gave the green light for everything. Spare no expense. Williams called in a private nurse to stay at the penthouse 24/7, keeping a vigil over little Margaret, while Johnson waged war for his daughter's soul. But the heroine had its hooks deep in Elise Johnson, being trapped in her father's fortress, even with her own baby right there, even with the boss begging her to clean up, was pure agony. The sickness hit within hours. Cold sweats, tremors, heaving, bones aching like they were snapping. But the mind games were worse. That demon hunger for the needle made Elise scream, weep, and plead with her father to open the door or bring her a fix. Those 3 days were absolute hell in that apartment. Mamie Johnson later told the Inner Circle, "Watching Elise kick the habit was like watching a torture session. She'd be lucid for a minute, holding the baby, sobbing about being a failure of a mother, swearing to straighten out. Then the sickness would claw its way back up. She'd turn into a monster, screaming at us to let her out, threatening to slit her wrists if we didn't pay up, spitting venom at Bumpy about how he destroyed her. It tore Bumpy apart to see his little girl twist in the wind. On June 15th, day 3 of the nightmare, a soldier stationed at the door to keep Elise on lockdown came to Johnson. He was terrified Elise was going to take the kid out. In a fit of madness, Elise had snatched up Margaret while the nurse stepped out. She dangled the infant near an open window, babbling nonsense. The muscle stepped in before tragedy struck, but the message was loud and clear. Keeping Elise there, keeping little Margaret in the same apartment, while Elise fought the devil on her back, was a liability we couldn't afford. On the evening of June 15th, 1952, Bumpy Johnson arranged a sit-down with Malcolm Little, before he became the legend Malcolm X, but already a force in the Nation of Islam, running operations to save the souls of the junkies haunting Harlem. Johnson and Malcolm went back years, sharing a cold, mutual respect, despite walking different paths, and had occasionally joined forces to hold down the neighborhood. "I need your counsel, Malcolm," Johnson stated flatly at a Lenox Avenue joint. "I need your help. My own daughter is deep in the hole, and I'm watching her destroy herself and nearly taking the baby with her. I'm out of moves." Johnson laid all the cards on the table, Margaret nearly dying in that cardboard box, the 3 days of pure hell managing 2 lives, and the cold fear that Elise might hurt the child while detoxing. Malcolm listened, sharp eyes nodding, his face heavy with the burden of Johnson's words. "Brother Bumpy," Malcolm said when the boss finished, "I feel your weight. I've lost people to the poison. I've watched the junk shatter families and crush neighborhoods. The heroin flooding Harlem right now is a weapon meant to break black people, and your daughter is a casualty of that war. Can you save her?" Johnson asked. "Can your program handle someone as far gone as Elise?" "I have room in the center I run," Malcolm stated. "We've pulled addicts out of the gutter who were worse off than your girl. We work the whole package, breaking the physical habit while rebuilding the spirit, giving them a code and a crew that replaces the needle. It ain't easy. Many fold, but some stand tall. Your daughter deserves a shot to stand tall. And Margaret?" Johnson pressed. "My granddaughter. She needs eyes on her 24/7. And she can't be anywhere near her mother while the sickness is being purged. Bring your daughter to us," Malcolm advised. "We'll provide the heavy lifting she needs, and you and your wife watch over Margaret while your daughter does her time. When your daughter is fit to be a mother, if she can claw her way back, then you reunite them. But for now, they stay separated. It's the only way." Johnson felt his steel resolve crack, tears forming for the 3rd time in 4 days. It was a weakness that was unthinkable before June 12th, when little Keisha walked up to his car. "Thank you, Malcolm," Johnson said, voice low. "Thank you for giving my girl a shot I couldn't give her. I'll deliver her tomorrow, and I handle the bill. Whatever the cost, I pay it. We don't charge for saving lives, Brother Bumpy," Malcolm said. "We ain't doing this for the cash. We do this because our people need to hold the line, need to fight the forces crushing our streets. Your money is good here as a donation to the cause, but it ain't a requirement. Your daughter gets help because she's a black woman who needs it, not because her father is the boss." That night, Bumpy laid out the plan to Elise during a moment of clarity. Elise broke down, admitting she was terrified, saying she didn't want to lose sight of Margaret, but admitting she knew she was too far gone to care for the kid right now. "I'm no good for her," Elise sobbed. "Margaret deserves better. Margaret deserves a mother who is whole," Johnson corrected firmly. "And you deserve a shot to become that mother. You're going to Malcolm's center. Get clean, get your head right, and when you're ready, Margaret will be waiting. Mamie and I will guard her with our lives until you can do it yourself. But you gotta do the heavy lifting, Elise. You have to want to get clean, bad enough to walk through hell and back." Elise nodded through the tears. "I'll try, Daddy, I swear." On Monday morning, June 16th, 1952, Bumpy Johnson drove his daughter to face her judgment. Down in Harlem, Malcolm Little and his crew were waiting at the center, ready to lock her into the intensive program. Before she stepped into that purgatory, Elise made one demand to hold Margaret just one last time. Mamie brought the kid over. 3 days of real food, and she had packed on half a pound. The docs had fixed her up. She looked human again, and Mamie settled her into Elise's arms. "I love you, Margaret," Elise whispered to the girl. "I'm sorry I failed you. I'm gonna get clean. I'll be the mother you deserve. That's a promise." Margaret was only 3 weeks old, blind to the words, but she felt the weight in her mother's voice. She let out a small coo. Elise planted a gentle kiss on the kid's forehead. She handed the burden back to Mamie and walked into the center without looking back, tears washing down her face. Johnson stood there, watching the heavy door slam shut behind his daughter. He held Margaret close, feeling the full weight of the duty settle onto his shoulders. "We're gonna handle this little girl," Johnson said to Mamie, his voice low and serious. "She gets everything she needs while her mother dries out, and we pray Elise fights her way back. She needs to get clean to come home. That's the only play we got left." Mamie nodded, gripping Johnson's hand tight. "We'll survive this, Bumpy." The family stands tall. For the next 18 months, from June 1952 to December 1953, Bumpy and Mamie raised that girl as their own. While they played house, Elise was in the trenches at Malcolm's place. The road was long and brutal. Detox was weeks of hell, followed by months of head shrinking and learning to live without the needle. Elise fell off the wagon more than once, but Malcolm's crew was stubborn. They always took her back, gave her another shot. Meanwhile, Margaret grew from a starving scrap into a healthy, happy kid under the boss's roof. Bumpy Johnson, the terror of Harlem, was completely wrapped around her finger, spending hours feeding her and playing games. He taught her to walk and talk. Davis remembers watching Bumpy with that kid. It was something else. This was a hard man, a guy who survived the pen, the gang wars, and the cops. Yet there he was, sitting on the floor for hours playing peekaboo with his granddaughter. He made faces to get a laugh, sang her to sleep. That girl changed Bumpy like nothing else could. She softened his edges, taught him patience, and made him show a little heart. She made him see he had something to protect worth more than the whole racket. By March 1953, she was 9 months old. Mamie said her first clear word was mama. She said it looking at a photo of Elise on Bumpy's dresser. But the second word? That was the one that broke Bumpy in late April 1953. "Pop." Margaret looked right at him and said it clear as day. "Pop." Johnson's eyes filled up instantly. She had just christened him Pop. It meant grandfather. It acknowledged the job he had been doing for nearly a year. It made him family in the only way that mattered. "That's right, sweetheart," Johnson said, voice thick. "I'm your pop, and I'm always gonna be here for you, always." But even as he spoke, he knew it was a gamble. Bumpy knew he might be lying. In May 1953, he was facing the judge. The feds had him on a narcotics conspiracy rap that was gonna send him away, likely to Alcatraz. That rock in San Francisco Bay was maximum security. Nobody checked out of there early. He was looking at 10 years inside, missing the girl's whole childhood. On May 18th, 1953, the gavel came down. Bumpy Johnson, guilty of conspiracy. The evidence was heavy. The FBI had been digging for years. They had the paper on his Harlem trade, and the rats lined up to testify. They nailed him on the heroin networks. On June 3rd, 1953, the bill came due. Judge Harold Medina handed him 15 years hard time. Destination: United States Penitentiary, Alcatraz. Right out of the gate, Johnson's mouthpiece, Theodore Green, tried to cut a deal for a lighter stretch. He played the sympathy card, citing Johnson's age, 48, and claiming his nose had been clean for years. He leaned heavily on the family angle, specifically that Johnson was the only rock for his infant granddaughter, while his own daughter was in rehab. But Judge Medina sat there like a statue made of ice. "Mr. Johnson, you constructed a kingdom of crime that has flooded the streets of Harlem with poison for decades. The fact that your own flesh and blood got hooked on heroin, the very junk you pushed on the streets, is the ultimate proof of the hell you created. Now you beg for mercy to raise this child, but that little girl is in this mess exactly because of the filth you peddled throughout Harlem. You are going to the Rock. 15 years at Alcatraz. Maybe that stretch will give you time to think about the wreckage you left behind." The gavel banged, and Johnson was taken into federal custody without missing a beat. The feds granted him one last sit-down with his kin before shipping him out to California. On June 5, 1953, just 2 days after the judge threw the book at him, Bumpy Johnson sat in the gray visiting room at the Manhattan Correctional Center, waiting for the end. He held his granddaughter, Margaret, knowing it would be a lifetime before he held her again. The kid was only 11 months old, stumbling on shaky legs and barely stringing 2 words together. She looked at the old gangster with pure love, clueless that her hero was about to vanish into the system. "Pop," she said, her tiny hand resting on Bumpy's hardened face. "Pop." Johnson pulled her in tight, letting the tears fall, not giving a damn who watched him break. "I love you, Margaret," he whispered. "Pop loves you. I have to go away for a stretch, a long one, but you keep it in your head that Pop always has your back. And one day I will walk back through that door. I swear it. We will be a family again." Mamie Johnson sat next to her man, weeping without a sound, reaching out to graze the kid's hand. "We will handle business, Bumpy," Mamie said. "I will raise her like she is our own flesh and blood. And when Elise kicks the habit and gets her head straight, she can step up as a mother again. But until you hit the streets again, I will make sure she knows who the boss is. She will see your face every day. I will tell her the legends. She will not forget." Then the guard barked that time was up. Johnson planted a kiss on Margaret's head, passed her to Mamie, and stood up to face the music. As he headed for the steel door that sealed his fate, Margaret's voice cut through the air. "Pop! Pop!" Johnson turned, forcing a smile through the pain. Then the heavy door slammed shut, and the king was gone. Bumpy touched down at Alcatraz on June 15, 1953, tagged for Cell Block B, Cage 184. For the next 10 years, until he walked free in November 1963, Johnson spent his time obsessing over Margaret, wondering how she was surviving in the world without his protection, praying she was safe and tough. Mamie sent letters to the Rock every week, packing photos of the kid and news from the outside. July 1953. "The kid is on her feet now, Bumpy. She is walking everywhere, never sitting still, always owning the room. She still calls for Pop. We show her your picture every day, and she points and says your name." December 1953. "The kid turned 1 last month. She is a stunner, Bumpy. She has your cold eyes and your smile. We threw a sit-down for her. She ate cake and laughed loud. I wish you were at the head of the table." June 1954. "Big news, Bumpy. Elise finished her stint at the center. She has been clean for 9 months now. She is back under our roof, learning how to be a real mother to Margaret. It is a slow process. She missed the kid's first year, and trust has to be earned, but she is putting in the work. Margaret calls her Mama now, and calls me Nana. But she still asks for the boss every night. We tell her you will return to your throne someday." April 1957. She is almost 4, Bumpy. She is sharp as a tack, watches everything. She starts school in September. Elise is holding it down. She has been straight for nearly 4 years, working a legit gig. Your daughter is finally strong, Bumpy. She's gonna make you stand tall when you walk through that door. November 1960. The kid is 7 years old now, 2nd grade, top of her class, sharp as a tack. She asks "'bout you constantly. Wants to know when the wait ends, what the joint is really like. Asking if you're safe. We tell her you'll be back soon, just 3 more years, Bumpy. 3 years, till you look your granddaughter in the eye. Johnson hoarded every letter, every snapshot, stuck them to the cold cell wall so Margaret's face was the first thing he saw daily. Cons inside. The Rock would later say Johnson never shut his mouth about that grandkid. Flashed her photo to anyone with eyes, counting down the days till the cage opened, until the reunion. Bumpy survived on that ink and paper sent by his wife. A yard bird who did time with Johnson told the Gazette back in 1968. Weekly mail call came, and Bumpy stood there sweating, praying for Mamie's handwriting, praying for a fresh look at Margaret. When the envelope landed, Bumpy sat on his bunk, reading lines till they blurred, shedding tears, grinning at the kid growing up while he rotted. That little girl kept the madness at bay for 10 years inside Alcatraz. She was his anchor, the reason he tallied every sunrise, knowing each one cut the distance to her. November 16th, 1963. Bumpy Johnson walked out of the federal pen, a free man. Did 10 years and 5 months of a 15-year stretch, sprung early for keeping his nose clean. He flew San Fran to New York, touching down at Idlewild, now JFK, at 6:30, with Mamie waiting. Where's the kid? Johnson demanded the second he let go of his wife. Is she here? Can I see her? She's home with Elise, Mamie answered, grinning at the old man's rush. She's 10 years old, Bumpy. She's a beauty, sharp as a whip, and dying to meet her pop in the flesh, not just pictures on a wall. She's been marking the calendar same as you. The ride back from the tarmac to Edgecombe Avenue dragged on like a life sentence. Over a decade since he held that girl. Over a decade since he heard the word pop. Back in that gray visiting room, Margaret was just a baby, 11 months, when he went away. Now she was 10, a stranger he loved, raised while he was locked in a steel cage. Pulling up to the flat, Johnson's hands trembled like a rookie's as he climbed the steps. Mamie cracked the door. Inside stood 2 faces Johnson barely knew. Elise Johnson, 39, clean and sober for 10 hard years, looking like the daughter he remembered, before the junk took her soul. And Margaret Johnson, 10 years old, sharp in a blue dress, braids tight, clutching a hand-painted sign that screamed "Welcome Home, Pop," looking jittery, finally facing the grandfather she only knew from crumpled photos and old war stories. The room went dead silent. Then Margaret spoke, quiet but steady. "Pop, is it you? Is it really you?" Johnson felt the water running down his cheeks. The king of Harlem, breaking down because a little girl called his name. 10 years of silence ended. "It's me, kid," Johnson choked out. "It's Pop. I'm back." Margaret dropped the cardboard and bolted, locking her arms tight around Johnson's waist, squeezing him with everything she had. "I missed you, Pop," she sobbed, breaking down. "I stared at your photo daily, and Nana told me all the stories about you. I marked off the days till you walked in. You're here now, and I love you." Johnson dropped to a knee to look her in the eye, holding her close, studying her face, seeing his own stare reflected back, seeing the beauty she became while he did his time. "I love you too, Margaret," Johnson said, letting the tears fall freely now. "You were on my mind every day I was away. You're the reason I'm still standing. You got me through the fire. I'm home now, and I ain't ever leaving you again. That is a blood oath from the old man to his kin. I am never walking away from you again." Margaret pulled back a little, studying the boss of Harlem's face, tracing the tracks of tears on his cheeks. Then she dropped a truth that broke everyone in that room. "You are my father now, Pop. Not just a grandfather. You are my dad. Because your shadow protected me even when you were locked away. You were always the one holding the reins." Johnson lost his voice. He just nodded, gripping his granddaughter tight while Mamie and Elise looked on. Tears streamed down their faces, both respecting the weight of this sit-down between the old lion and the cub. The girl he had plucked from a cardboard box 10 years back was the only family business that really mattered. Later that night, after Margaret had finally turned in, still buzzing about having the head of the family home, Johnson held court with Maymay and Elise in the living room, and Elise finally spoke her piece after a decade of silence. "Thank you, Daddy, for saving Margaret, for saving me, for never closing the door on us. Even when I gave you every reason to cut me loose, I stayed clean for 10 years because you put a bet on me. When the rest of the world folded, Margaret is breathing and strong because you got to her before the clock ran out. I know I can never square this debt, but I want you to know how I am spending the rest of my days, being the mother Margaret needs and the daughter you earned. That is my word to you." Johnson looked at his girl. Really looked at her, sizing her up for the first time in years, seeing the strong woman standing tall instead of the junkie she used to be, and he cracked a smile. "You already made it, Elise. You are there." Bumpy Johnson walked the streets for 5 more years after Alcatraz, before his heart gave out on July 7th, 1968, at the age of 62. In that final stretch, he gave every spare minute to Margaret, watching her grow from a 10-year-old kid into a 15-year-old young lady, paying back the time the government stole from him. But Johnson never forgot June 12th, 1952, the day a starving kid named Keisha Williams walked up to his car looking for a handout, the day Johnson broke down because that kid's hunger showed him the cold truth that his own blood was out there suffering. That day started the whole operation that led to rescuing Margaret. The Williams crew, little Keisha and her mother, got the full Bumpy Johnson protection package for 2 years, rent paid, food on the table, jobs secured. Keisha Williams grew up to run a classroom in the Harlem schools, and she would tell her students the story about the day she met Bumpy Johnson and how a gangster's respect saved her people. "Mr. Johnson gave us a shot at life. When we were down for the count," Keisha said in a 1985 interview, "my mother and I were staring at the streets. We might have checked out if Mr. Johnson had not stepped in. But what I did not see then, what I only figured out later, was that saving us saved him too. My empty stomach proved to him that his own granddaughter was starving. My struggle showed him his own flesh and blood was in the line of fire. By asking for a favor, I saved another kid. A girl I never shook hands with, but who would not be here without Mr. Johnson making a move." So in this life, me, my mother, and Margaret Johnson all kept each other alive that day. My desperation was Margaret's shield. Margaret's danger forced Bumpy to act, and the boss's code saved the whole lot of us. Margaret Johnson grew up to be a serious woman, getting her degree in handling business. She became a social worker, fixing broken families right here in Harlem, carrying the torch her pop lit the day he pulled her out of that cardboard coffin. She told folks that June 13th, 1952, the day her pop kicked down the door and carried her out, was her true birthday, the day she really started living, and she always repeated the final words her pop left her with before he passed in July 1968, words that summed up the whole game. Lessons he picked up from a girl at his car window in June 1952. Lessons from saving his own blood. The bottom line on what actually counts. "Margaret, I spent a lifetime building a kingdom of crime, stacking cash, grabbing power, surviving gang wars and federal cages. But that is all dust compared to you. Saving your life was the only job I ever pulled that was truly worth the risk. Protecting you was the only time I was a righteous man instead of just a successful gangster. Lock this deep in your memory, sweetheart. The heaviest move anyone can make is shielding the children who stand defenseless. That is the only thing that counts, the only legacy that truly holds weight." It was June 12th, 1952, the little girl who made Bumpy Johnson crack. The day the whole world shifted. One starving kid asked for a favor, and that single act saved 2 young lives and forced a stone-cold criminal to remember just how to be a man.